So today, we're plugging into the wild world of the electric vehicle market. You see the headlines and it feels like this unstoppable wave of growth. But 2025? Well, it's revealed a pretty deep split in the road ahead. It's a tale of two very different futures for EVs, and we're going to break it all down.
And hey, at first glance, the story looks absolutely incredible, right? Global EV sales shot up by a massive 21% in 2025. We're talking 18.5 million EVs sold in just the first 11 months. That's a huge number. It seems like the EV revolution is just crushing it. So that settles it then. Case closed. Full speed ahead. Well, maybe not so fast. That big, flashy number we just looked at, it's actually hiding a way more complicated story just under the surface. And here it is. This is the heart of the matter. The global EV market has basically split into two completely different realities. On one side, you've got China and Europe, where things are still booming, posting really strong growth. But then there's North America, which is hitting some serious turbulence, with sales actually going down. So how can one market be going in two opposite directions at the same time? Let's dig in. All right, let's start with the good news, the boom. What's the secret sauce behind the incredible charge forward we're seeing in China and Europe? Okay, you really have to appreciate the sheer scale of what's happening in China. Just look at that. An unbelievable 62% of all global EV sales happen there. That's 11.6 million vehicles. So it probably won't surprise you that the Chinese automaker BYD is now the single largest EV maker in the world. They're an absolute powerhouse. And China's not keeping this success to itself. Nope. Chinese EVs are going global, and they're doing it fast. BYD's exports are just skyrocketing. I mean, sales to Europe alone jumped by a mind-blowing 400% this year. They are expanding everywhere. And Europe's story is just as impressive. You'd think with some governments cutting back on subsidies, things would slow down, but no. The market there has been incredibly resilient, posting 33% growth year over year. A lot of this is being driven by new incentives and a real focus on smaller, more affordable electric cars, the kind that are just perfect for European cities. This really gets summed up perfectly by Lobo Tigre, the CEO of IndependentSpeculator.com. He puts it this way. And Europe certainly hasn't given up on electric cars. They've doubled down. So even with major challenges like the war and economic pressures, the continent's push to go electric is still a huge priority. Okay, so that's the story of explosive growth. Now let's shift gears and take a look at North America's much bumpier road. Let's figure out why the US and Canada seem to be tapping the brakes. And this is the number that tells the whole story for the region this year. While the rest of the world was booming, EV sales in North America actually fell by 1%. Now, 1% might not sound like a disaster, but after years of fast, consistent growth, it's a huge reversal. So what gives? Well, a huge part of the story comes down to policy changes. First, back in January, the main Canadian EV incentive program just ran out of money. Then in the US, the federal tax credits were brought to an end. Sure, there was a little sales spike right before the September 30th deadline as people rushed to buy, but the long-term effect was a major cooling of the market. But it's so important to keep this in perspective. As Lobo Tigre points out, it's a very US-centric view to think that the EVs are going away. What's happening in North America is a big deal. For the region, for sure, but it is not the whole global story, not by a long shot. So, if the North American market is changing this dramatically, what's the auto industry doing about it? Well, that brings us to the next big thing, the coming hybrid wave, and how car makers are having to adapt to this new reality. First, let's just quickly touch on what's holding buyers back. The top three roadblocks are still the same old suspects. Price, they're just expensive up front. Then there's range anxiety, that fear you'll run out of juice. And finally, the lack of reliable, easy-to-find charging stations. These issues are a really big deal in a market that loves its big trucks and SUVs.
And you can see this hesitation clearly in the numbers. A recent survey from CDK Global found a pretty major shift in what people want. Among folks who currently own a gas car, their interest in buying a fully electric one dropped by a whopping 20% in a single year. That is a massive change in attitude.
And you better believe the car companies are listening. They're making a big pivot. Ford, for instance, is reportedly swapping out its all-electric F-150 Lightning for a new hybrid version. And it's not just Ford. Big players like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan are also pulling back on pure EV production to focus way more on hybrids. This new game plan is laid out pretty clearly by Stephen Kozowski from Kia North America. He just says it flat out. Hybrids, to us, are the path forward. It seems like for a lot of automakers, hybrids are the perfect bridge for people who just aren't quite ready to take the full electric plunge. Okay, so with all this twisting and turning, what's actually driving the future? Let's wrap things up by looking ahead at the key trends you're going to want to watch in 2026. There are a few big things on the horizon. Globally, new export rules from China could really shake up supply chains. Here in North America, the big trade deal between the US, Mexico, and Canada, the USMCA, is up for renegotiation, which creates a lot of uncertainty. And over in Europe, they're bringing in even stricter emission standards, which will keep pushing companies toward cleaner cars. Looking ahead, it seems like the crazy, explosive growth we've seen is starting to level off a bit. Forecasts show global EV sales growth slowing from around 31% down to 15% in 2026. Now, don't get me wrong, 15% growth is still fantastic, but it's a clear signal that the market is entering a new, more mature phase. And all of this leaves us with $1 million or maybe $1 trillion question. Is this big pivot to hybrids, especially in North America, just a temporary bridge to get us to an all-electric future? Or are we watching the industry choose a different road entirely? That's what we'll all be watching in the years to come.